The day Rowan Hale bought every pie in town, Eliza Voss knew her life was about to change, and not in a good way. He wasn't asking. He was claiming. A stranger with cold eyes and pockets full of cash, making demands no sane woman would accept. But this wasn't about pies. It was about control. And in a town where everyone minded their own business, suddenly everyone was watching. What did this man want? Why her? And how far would he go to get it? Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The dust never settled in Ember Flats. It just moved around, trading places with itself, coating everything in a fine layer of resignation. The town sat in a valley between two ridges that looked like the earth had shrugged and given up halfway through. Nothing grew there that hadn't fought for it. Nothing stayed that didn't have to. Eliza Voss had been there 17 years, long enough to forget what leaving felt like. She stood behind her table every morning at 6, same spot outside Brennan's general store, same blue checkered cloth stretched tight over warped wood. The pies came out while the air still held a bit of cool, apple, cherry, peach when she could get it, and a custard that people either loved or pretended to. She didn't care which. The pies sold, the money came, and that was enough. She'd learned not to want more than enough. The morning Rowan Hale rode in, she was pulling a lattice-top apple from the basket when she felt it, that shift in the air that happens when something's off. Not wrong, exactly, just different, the kind of different that makes you look up even when you don't want to. He came from the east, which was odd because nothing came from the east except wind and bad news. His horse was gray, or maybe it had been brown once and the dust had claimed it. Hard to tell. The man himself looked like he'd been carved from something harder than wood and left out too long. Tall, but not showy about it. Lean in a way that suggested hunger, old or new. His hat was pulled low, his coat was long, and he moved with the kind of quiet that made noise feel rude. Eliza didn't stare. Staring got you noticed, and she'd built a decent life on not being noticed. She set the pie down, smoothed the cloth, and waited for him to pass. He didn't pass. His horse stopped right in front of her table, close enough that she could smell the animal, salt and work and miles. The man didn't dismount. He just sat there, looking at her pies like they were a problem he was trying to solve. She gave him 5 seconds, then went back to arranging. Let him look. How much for all of them? His voice didn't match his appearance. She'd expected gravel. Got something smoother. Still rough around the edges, but not trying to prove anything. Eliza glanced up. His face was sun-worn, lines around his eyes that came from squinting, not smiling. His jaw was set in a way that suggested it stayed that way most of the time. He wasn't looking at her, just the pies. "They're priced individual," she said. $1.25 each. "I'll take them all. How many you got?" She counted without looking. 14. "I'll give you $20 for the lot." Eliza's hand paused on a cherry pie. $20 was more than fair. It was generous, actually, considering she usually cleared about 16 on a good day. But something in the way he said it made her want to say no. Not because the offer was bad, because it felt like a test. "They're $1.25 each," she repeated. "You want all 14, that's $17.50. For the first time, his eyes moved to her face. They were pale, somewhere between gray and blue, the color of sky before a storm decides what it wants to be. He studied her for a moment, and she felt the weight of it. Not threatening, exactly, but deliberate, like he was cataloging something. Fair enough. He swung down from the horse in one fluid motion, pulled a leather pouch from inside his coat, and counted out the money in coins. His hands were scarred. Old injuries, mostly healed. He set the coins on the table in a neat stack. Eliza counted it. Exact. "Box or basket?" she asked. "I'll take them as they are." She started wrapping each pie in cloth, working quickly, aware that people were watching now. Mrs. Callahan from the boarding house. Sam Brennan in the doorway of his store. Even Dutch, the farrier, had stopped mid-hammer to look. This was the most interesting thing to happen in Ember Flats since the Henderson kid had tried to ride that half-broke mare and ended up in Doc Perry's office with a collarbone pointing the wrong direction. Rowan Hale loaded the pies into his saddlebags with care, which surprised her. Men like him, and she was already slotting him into a category, fair or not, didn't usually handle things gently. When he was done, he turned back to her. "You bake these yourself?" "I do." "Every day?" "Most days." He nodded, like that confirmed something. Then he said the thing that made her stomach drop. From now on, you bake for me, nobody else. I'll pay double what you're making now. The world got very quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Eliza stared at him. Excuse me? You heard me. I'll pay you double your daily take. You bake, I buy. Exclusive. That's not how this works. It is now. No, she said, and her voice came out sharper than she intended. It's not. His expression didn't change. I'm making you a fair offer. You're making me an insane offer. I don't even know you. Rowan Hale. He didn't offer his hand. Now you do. That's not... She stopped, took a breath. Mr. Hale, I appreciate your business, but I sell to whoever wants to buy. That's the arrangement. It's been the arrangement for 17 years, and it works fine. I'll pay triple. The number hit her like cold water. Triple. She did the math automatically. That was close to $50 a day. $50 a day for doing exactly what she was already doing, just for one customer instead of 20. It was insane. It was also tempting, which made her angry. No, she said flatly. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not anger. More like confusion. Like he'd just watched a door close that he'd expected to walk through. Why not? Because this isn't just business, Mr. Hale. This is my spot. These are my customers. Some of them have been buying from me since before you knew this town existed. I'm not cutting them off because a stranger rides in with deep pockets. They can buy somewhere else. There is nowhere else. I'm it. You want to pay triple? Fine. Buy whatever I have left at the end of the day, but I'm not baking just for you. The silence stretched. Behind her, she heard the creak of Brennan's door. Footsteps. People were gathering now, slow and cautious, like wildlife approaching a watering hole when they weren't sure if the predator had left. Rowan Hale looked at the empty table, then at her, then at the growing audience. His jaw worked, just slightly. Then he nodded once. I'll be back tomorrow, he said. Pies are first come, first serve. I'll be first then. He mounted his horse in that same easy motion, turned and rode toward the edge of town where the old Mackenzie place sat empty. Eliza watched him go, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Half relief, half dread. Sam Brennan was the first to speak. Well, he said, scratching his beard. That was something. Who the hell was that? Mrs. Callahan asked, her voice pitched high with excitement and fear in equal measure. Trouble, Dutch said, and spat into the dirt. Eliza didn't answer. She started folding up her cloth, hands moving automatically, while her mind spun. She'd said no to easy money. Stupid. She'd stood her ground against a stranger who looked like he didn't hear no very often. Possibly stupider. But the alternative, letting some man she didn't know dictate the terms of her life, that felt worse than stupid. That felt like losing something she couldn't afford to lose. By noon, the whole town knew. That was how Ember Flats worked. News moved faster than wind and stuck longer. Eliza heard the story repeated back to her 3 times, each version a little different, a little bigger. By the third telling, Rowan Hale had offered her $100 a day and threatened to burn down the competition if she didn't comply. That's not what happened, she told Jenny Porter, who'd heard it from her husband, who'd heard it from Dutch. But he did offer you money to bake just for him. He did. And you said no? I did. Jenny looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Eliza, honey, are you out of your mind? Maybe she was. She went home that afternoon to the small house she rented from the widow Marsh and stared at her kitchen. The stove she'd repaired herself when the door hinge broke. The table she'd sanded down after buying it third hand from a family leaving town. The bowls, the rolling pin, the flour sack with the corner torn that she kept meaning to sew, but never did. This was hers. Small, worn, nothing fancy, but hers. She made herself dinner, beans and cornbread, same as always, and tried not to think about $50 a day. Tried not to imagine what that money could do. A new stove. Fixing the roof before winter. Maybe even saving enough to... What? Leave. Go where? She was still thinking about it when she went to bed and still thinking about it when she woke up at 4:30 the next morning to start baking. The dough fought her. The first batch of crusts tore. The second batch browned too fast on one side. By the time she loaded everything into her cart and wheeled it to her spot, she was already tired and the sun was barely up. Rowan Hale was waiting. He stood next to his gray horse, same coat, same hat, same unreadable expression. The street was empty except for him. Nobody else was up yet. He'd meant what he said about being first. Eliza set up her table without acknowledging him. Spread the cloth. Arranged the pies, 10 today, because one had burned and another had collapsed in the oven like a failure of faith. When she was done, she looked at him. "Morning," she said. "Morning." He stepped forward, pulled out his pouch. "I'll take them all." "No." His hand paused. "No?" "You can buy 2, maybe 3 if you're hungry. The rest are for other people. I'm willing to pay if they... "I don't care what you're willing to pay, Mr. Hale. I told you yesterday how this works." Something hardened in his face. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." They stood there, locked in a stalemate that felt bigger than pie. Eliza's pulse was loud in her ears. She wasn't afraid of him exactly, but she was aware, sharply, uncomfortably aware, that he could make this difficult if he wanted to. He was bigger, stronger, and apparently didn't mind making people uncomfortable. But he didn't push. Instead, he did something that surprised her more than aggression would have. He stepped back. "2 pies, then," he said quietly. She blinked. "What flavor?" "You pick." She wrapped up an apple and a cherry, took his money, exact change again, and handed them over. He took them, nodded once, and walked away. Not to his horse. Just away. Down the street toward the far end of town where the buildings got sparse and the dust took over. Eliza watched him go, feeling like she'd just won something and lost something in the same moment. The rest of the day was normal, or as normal as anything could be after that. Her regulars came. Old Tom, who always bought peach if she had it. The Morrison family, who split a cherry between 5 people and made it last. Young Billy Watts, who was sweet on her and terrible at hiding it, buying an apple pie his mother didn't need just for an excuse to talk. But everyone wanted to know about Rowan Hale. Where was he staying? What did he want? Why her? She didn't have answers. And the not knowing sat in her stomach like bad bread. It was Mrs. Callahan who brought the first real piece of information, stopping by near closing with her usual custard pie and her unusual worried expression. "He's taken the Mackenzie place," she said, lowering her voice even though nobody was around. "Saw him hauling water this morning. Looks like he's planning to stay." "The Mackenzie place has been empty for 3 years," Eliza said. "Roof's half gone. Well, he's fixing it. Dutch saw him buying lumber and nails from Brennan." That night, lying in bed, Eliza tried to make sense of it. A man rides into town with enough money to buy every pie she makes, offers her triple what she earns, accepts rejection with barely a word, and then stays? Sets up in a half-ruined house and starts fixing things? It didn't add up. The pattern held for a week. Every morning, Rowan Hale was there when she arrived. Every morning, he asked for all the pies. Every morning, she said no. Every morning, he bought 2 and left without argument. It became a routine, almost comfortable in its predictability. The town stopped talking about it quite so much, though people still watched. Eliza caught herself watching too sometimes when he walked away, trying to figure out what kind of man he was, trying to understand what he wanted. On the 8th day, he changed the script. "Why do you do this?" he asked after she'd handed him his 2 pies. "Do what?" "This." He gestured at the table. "Every day. Same spot, same time. You could sell these out of your house, make people come to you." "Could," she agreed. "Don't want to." "Why not?" She considered not answering, but something about the way he asked, genuinely curious, not challenging, made her pause. "Because this is the center of town," she said finally. "People come here anyway, for the store, for the post, for whatever. If I'm here, they see me, they remember. And maybe they buy, maybe they don't. But either way, I'm part of the day. I'm part of the town." She looked at him. "You put yourself in a house at the edge, you might as well not exist." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Some people prefer not existing." "You one of them?" "Used to be." The admission surprised her. Before she could respond, Sam Brennan came out of his store, calling her name. A customer needed change. The moment broke, and when she looked back, Rowan was already walking away. But something had shifted. She felt it. The shift became a crack 3 days later. It was a hot morning, the kind where the air felt thick before the sun even cleared the ridge. Eliza was setting up when she heard raised voices, Dutch and someone else. She looked up to see Rowan Hale standing near the farrier's shop, facing down two men she didn't recognize, drifters by the look of them. Rough clothes, rougher attitudes. "I said move along," Dutch was saying, his hammer gripped tight in one scarred hand. "We're just looking for work," one of the drifters said, but his eyes were on Dutch's cash box, visible through the open door. "Don't need help. Try the next town." "Maybe we like this town." That's when Rowan stepped in. Didn't say anything at first, just moved between Dutch and the drifters, his presence alone changing the math of the situation. "You lost?" he asked, his voice flat. The bigger drifter sized him up. "Who's asking?" "Someone who's telling you to move on." "That's so." The drifter's hand drifted toward his belt. Eliza saw the knife handle there, worn and ready. What happened next took maybe 3 seconds, but felt longer. The drifter's hand moved. Rowan's moved faster. There was a sharp crack. Rowan had struck the man's wrist with something, maybe just his hand, Eliza couldn't tell from where she stood, and the knife hit the dirt. The second drifter started forward, but Rowan just looked at him. That's all. Just looked. And the man stopped. "Next town's 6 miles west," Rowan said calmly. "I'd start walking." They went. Grumbling, throwing threats over their shoulders, but they went. Dutch stared at Rowan. "Didn't need help." "I know." "So why'd you step in?" Rowan glanced toward Eliza's table just for a second. Seemed like the thing to do. He walked away before Dutch could respond, heading back toward the Mackenzie place. Dutch looked at Eliza. Eliza looked back. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that maybe Rowan Hale wasn't quite what they'd thought he was. That afternoon, Jenny Porter stopped by for her weekly apple pie and leaned in conspiratorially. "Did you hear what happened with those drifters?" "I saw it. Everyone's saying Rowan Hale's a gunfighter, or a lawman, or both." "Everyone should mind their business." "He's making it their business, Eliza. First he shows up wanting to buy you out. Now he's running off trouble like he owns the place. People are getting nervous." People are always nervous. But Jenny had a point, whether Eliza wanted to admit it or not. Rowan was becoming part of the town's fabric, but on his own terms, in his own way. He helped Dutch occasionally now, shoeing horses or mending iron. He'd fixed Mrs. Callahan's boarding house steps without being asked, and refused payment. He bought supplies from Brennan, always paying exact, never haggling. And every morning he showed up for 2 pies and left quietly when Eliza said no to the rest. It was becoming almost normal, which was probably why, when the normal shattered, it hit so hard. 2 weeks after his arrival, Eliza was closing up shop when she heard horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. She looked up to see a group of riders coming in from the south, 5 men, well armed, with the kind of coordination that spoke to purpose. They stopped in front of Brennan's store. The lead rider dismounted, a tall man with a marshal's badge and a face that said he'd worn it a long time. "We're looking for someone," he announced, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Goes by Rowan Hale. Seen him?" Eliza's blood went cold. Sam Brennan came out, wiping his hands on his apron. "Might have. What's your business with him?" The marshal's expression didn't change. "Federal business. Where is he?" Before Sam could answer, before anyone could answer, Rowan appeared, walking up the street from the direction of the Mackenzie place, calm as Sunday morning. He saw the marshal. The marshal saw him. The air went tight. "Hale," the marshal said. "Marshal Porter," Rowan replied. "Need to ask you some questions." "About?" "About a missing payroll shipment 2 months back. About a federal transport that got hit outside Silverton. About 3 dead men and $30,000 nobody can find." The crowd that had gathered went silent. Eliza felt her hands go numb. Federal transport, dead men, $30,000. Rowan didn't move. "I wasn't anywhere near Silverton 2 months ago." "You got proof of that?" "Do you have proof I was?" "Got witnesses say a man matching your description was seen in the area." "Matching my description isn't the same as me." The marshal stepped closer. You gonna make this difficult? I'm gonna tell you the truth. I wasn't there. I didn't rob any transport, and unless you've got something more than someone said they saw someone who looked like someone, you've got no cause to bring me in. For a long moment, nobody moved. Eliza realized she was holding her breath. Around her, the town had gone still as stone. Then Marshal Porter nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Maybe you weren't there. He leaned in, lowering his voice, but not so low that Eliza couldn't hear. But you've been running from something, Hale. I can smell it on you, and whatever it is, it's going to catch up eventually. Always does. He stepped back, signaled his men, and they mounted up. Before they left, he looked at Eliza, then at the gathered crowd. Anyone here vouches for this man? Knows where he's been? What he's doing? Silence. Heavy and damning. The marshal smiled without humor. That's what I thought. They rode out the way they'd come, dust rising behind them like a verdict. Eliza looked at Rowan. He was still standing there, watching them go, his face unreadable. When the riders disappeared over the ridge, he turned and walked back toward the Mackenzie place without saying a word to anyone. The crowd dispersed slowly, murmuring. Eliza stood at her table, hands shaking now that the fear had somewhere to go. Dutch approached, his expression grave. You still selling to him? I don't know, she said honestly. Might want to think on that. She did think on it. All evening, all night. A federal transport, dead men, $30,000. It painted a picture she didn't want to see, of Rowan Hale as something darker than a drifter, something more dangerous than a man who just wanted to be left alone. But then she thought about him buying pies every morning with exact change, helping Dutch, fixing Mrs. Callahan's steps, standing between the town and those drifters without being asked. None of it made sense, which meant she was missing something. The next morning, she almost didn't set up her table. Lay in bed arguing with herself about whether it was worth it, worth the risk, worth the questions, worth whatever came next. But in the end, she got up, baked her pies, loaded her cart, went to her spot. Rowan Hale was waiting. They looked at each other across the empty street. The sun was just starting to rise, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. He looked tired. She probably did too. I didn't do it, he said. No preamble, no explanation, just that. You don't owe me an explanation. Maybe not. But you deserve one anyway. He stepped closer, stopped at the edge of the table. I wasn't in Silverton. I was 3 states over working a cattle drive. Got 30 men who'll say the same. But the marshal's not wrong. I have been running. Just not from that. From what then? He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. From the kind of life where people assume the worst because it's easier than asking questions. Where a man's past matters more than what he does today. I came here because I thought maybe, in a town this quiet, nobody would care enough to look. You thought wrong. Yeah, I did. He looked at her pies, then back at her face. I'll leave if you want. Clear out today. But I want you to know, every morning I came here, it wasn't about control. It was about... He trailed off, searching for words. It was about something steady. Something that didn't change. You, here, every day, same time. It was the first steady thing I'd had in a decade. Eliza felt something crack in her chest. Not break, just crack, letting something in. 2 pies, she said quietly. He blinked. What? I said 2 pies. What flavor? For the first time since she'd met him, Rowan Hale smiled. It was small, barely there, but it was real. You pick, he said. She wrapped up an apple and a cherry, took his money, and handed them over. Their fingers brushed. Brief, accidental, but neither of them pulled away fast. Thank you, he said. For what? For asking questions. He left. The town woke up. Life went on. But something had changed. Eliza felt it in the way people looked at her table that morning. Not suspicious exactly, but uncertain. Waiting to see what she'd do. Whether she'd stand by him or step away. She didn't know yet herself. All she knew was that Rowan Hale had come to Ember Flats like a storm warning, had made her an offer she'd refused, and then had stayed anyway. Had become something other than what he'd seemed. Had become, against all logic and sense, someone she wanted to understand. And that, more than federal marshals or missing money or suspicious towns, was what scared her most. because understanding him meant seeing him, and seeing him meant deciding whether what she saw was worth the risk. The answer to that question, she suspected, would determine a lot more than just whether she sold him pies. The marshal's visit changed things in ways Eliza hadn't anticipated. Not dramatic ways. Nobody ran Rowan out of town or confronted him in the street. It was subtler than that, more insidious. People stopped meeting his eyes when he passed. Conversations died when he walked into Brennan's store. Mrs. Callahan, who'd accepted his help with her boarding house steps, now crossed the street to avoid him. Eliza saw it happening and felt something twist in her gut. Not quite anger, not quite sympathy. Something in between that she didn't have a name for. She kept selling him pies. 2 every morning, same as before. And every morning, the look she got grew heavier, more pointed. Jenny Porter stopped buying from her altogether, which stung more than Eliza wanted to admit. They'd been friendly once, in the way women in small towns were friendly. Surface level, but genuine enough. Now Jenny walked past her table like it didn't exist. On the 4th day after the marshal's visit, Dutch finally said what everyone else was thinking. "You're making a mistake," he told her, voice low, while she was wrapping up his weekly peach pie. "Man's trouble. You can smell it on him. The marshal said he couldn't prove anything. Marshall also said Hale's running from something. That good enough for me. Since when do we run people out based on what they might have done?" Dutch's jaw worked. "Since one of our own starts defending strangers over her neighbors." The words landed like a slap. Eliza handed him his pie without responding, and Dutch walked away without his usual nod of thanks. That night, she couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle her shutters, thinking about what Dutch had said. Her neighbors. Her town. 17 years she'd been here, building something small but solid. And now she was risking it for a man she barely knew, whose story had more holes than facts. She almost didn't show up the next morning. Got as far as loading half the pies into her cart before she stopped, hands shaking, and asked herself what the hell she was doing. But she finished loading, wheeled the cart to her spot, set up her table. Rowan was there, same as always. But something was different. He looked, tired wasn't the right word. Worn, maybe. Like the week had cost him something. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He didn't ask for pies right away. Just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, looking at the empty street. The sun was coming up behind him, turning his shadow long and thin. "You don't have to do this," he said finally. "Do what?" "Keep selling to me. Keep—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "People are talking. I hear it. You're making things hard on yourself." Things were already hard. Not like this. She looked at him properly then, really looked. Saw the tightness around his eyes, the way he held himself like he was expecting a blow. And she realized something that should have been obvious from the start. He cared what people thought, not in a vain way, in a tired, hurt way. Like he'd been judged so many times that he'd learned to expect it, but never learned to stop feeling it. "You want to tell me what you're really running from?" she asked. His eyes snapped to hers. "What makes you think—" Because nobody runs to a place like Ember Flats unless they're running from something worse. So what was it? Bad marriage? Bad business? Bad choices? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, all 3 probably, but mostly the last one. What kind of choices? The kind where you wake up one day and realize you've become someone you don't recognize, someone you don't want to be. He pulled his hands from his pockets, looked at them like they belonged to someone else. "I did things I'm not proud of. Legal things, mostly, but that doesn't make them right. Worked for men who didn't care who they hurt as long as they got paid. Helped them hurt people. Told myself it was just business, just survival. And then one day I looked in a mirror and couldn't stand what I saw. So you left. So I ran. Spent 2 years moving from place to place, trying to find somewhere that felt clean. Somewhere I could start over without the weight of all that following me." He gestured at the town, the empty street, the rising sun. Thought maybe this was it. Quiet. Forgotten. A place where nobody would care about my past because they were too busy surviving their present. And then the marshal showed up. He agreed. Asking about something I didn't do, but close enough to things I did do that nobody's going to believe me. Story of my life. Eliza set down the pies she'd been holding. Why'd you want to buy all my pies? Really, it wasn't about the pies. No, it was about... He stopped, frustrated with his own inability to explain. It was about having something. One thing. That was just mine. Something nobody could take or ruin or judge. Stupid, right? Little bit, yeah. He almost smiled. Figured. But I get it, she said, surprising herself. Wanting something steady. Something that doesn't change or disappoint you. I get that. They stood in the morning quiet, two people who'd both learned not to expect much from the world, recognizing something similar in each other. 2 pies, she said. You sure? I'm not sure about anything, but yeah. She wrapped up an apple and a cherry. He paid, exact change as always. When he took them, he held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, he said, for not assuming the worst. Day's young, still time for that. This time he did smile and walked away. But the town wasn't done with either of them. That afternoon, Sam Brennan stopped by her table. He waited until the last customer had left, then leaned against the post supporting his store's awning. Need to talk to you, he said. Eliza's stomach sank. Sam was a fair man, a decent man. If he was here, it wasn't for small talk. About Hale, he continued. People are worried, Eliza, not just about him, about you, about what it means that you're still associating with him. I'm selling him pies, Sam, same as I sell to everyone. It's not the same and you know it. You're making a statement, choosing him over the people you've known for years. I'm not choosing anyone. I'm just not refusing someone based on suspicion and gossip. Sam sighed. It's more than gossip. The marshal had questions, not proof. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, looks like you're defending a man you barely know against a whole town full of people who've never given you reason to doubt them. The worst part was, he wasn't wrong. Not entirely. Eliza felt it. The pull between what made sense and what felt right. The town had been good to her mostly, given her space to build her life, bought her pies, left her alone when she needed it, and now she was risking all that for someone who might actually be exactly what everyone feared. I hear you, she said carefully, but I'm not ready to condemn him just because it's easier. Not asking you to condemn him, just asking you to be careful, for your own sake. He left without buying anything, which had never happened before. That night, Eliza made a list. Not on paper, she wasn't that organized, but in her head, lying in bed, staring at shadows. On one side, the town, her reputation, 17 years of stability, the safety of going along with what everyone else wanted. On the other side, a stranger with a past he wouldn't fully explain, a stack of suspicions she couldn't disprove, and her own stubborn refusal to judge him without evidence. It wasn't a fair fight. The smart choice was obvious, which was probably why she kept selling him pies. A week passed, then another. The pattern held. Rowan showed up every morning, bought his 2 pies, left quietly. The town watched. Eliza felt their watching like pressure against her skin, constant and uncomfortable. Then things escalated. It started small. Someone knocked over her table one night, scattered her cloth in the dirt. Could have been an accident, could have been the wind, except it wasn't windy, and the table was heavy enough that it wouldn't just tip. She set it back up. Didn't mention it to anyone. 2 days later, she found a note tucked under her door. No signature, just 3 words in rough handwriting, choose better company. She burned it in her stove and tried to forget about it, but the third incident was harder to ignore. She'd just set up her table, was arranging the morning's pies, 8 of them, a slow day, when Billy Watts approached. Sweet Billy, who'd been buying pies he didn't need just to talk to her for 2 years. He looked miserable. Eliza, He stopped, cleared his throat. My ma says I can't buy from you anymore. Her hand stilled. Why not? Because of him, because you're... Billy's face went red. It ain't fair. I told her it ain't fair, but she says if I keep coming here, people will think I agree with what you're doing, and that'll hurt Pa's business at the mill. Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. It's okay, Billy. It ain't okay. It's okay, she repeated more firmly. I understand. He left looking like he might cry, and Eliza stood there feeling like she'd lost something she hadn't realized she'd valued. Billy's awkward conversation, his transparent crush, His weekly purchase that she'd always found more endearing than annoying, gone, because she'd refused to do what everyone else wanted. She was still processing that when Rowan arrived. He took one look at her face and stopped. What happened? Nothing. Eliza. She hated that he said her name like that, like he actually cared, like he had a right to care. But she was tired and frustrated, and the words came out before she could stop them. People are asking me to choose between you and them, and I don't even know why I'm not choosing them. I should choose them. It makes sense to choose them. So choose them, he said quietly. What? Choose them. Stop selling to me. I'll leave town. Problem solved. You just leave? I've left before. It's what I do. Something in his voice, resignation, maybe, or bone-deep weariness, made her look up. He wasn't being noble. He was being realistic. He'd learned that staying put meant complications, and complications meant pain, so leaving was easier. No, she said. No? I'm not. She stopped, frustrated with herself. I'm not making decisions based on what's easiest for everyone else. Not anymore. Even if it costs you? Even then. He studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. Why? Because somebody has to ask questions instead of just accepting the first bad story they hear. And apparently that somebody is me, even though I'm not qualified and don't particularly want the job. Not many people would do that for a stranger. Yeah, well, maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe you're the first person in a long time who's treated me like I might be worth the benefit of the doubt. The words hung between them, heavier than they should have been. Eliza felt her throat tighten. This was getting complicated. This was getting personal. And personal meant messy. And messy meant... A crash interrupted her thoughts. She spun to see a group of men across the street, 5 or 6 of them, gathered near Dutch's shop. They weren't doing anything overtly threatening, but their presence felt wrong, deliberate. Rowan followed her gaze. His whole body went still in a way that reminded her of a predator catching a scent. That's new, he said quietly. They're just talking. No, they're watching. There's a difference. As if to prove his point, one of the men, Turner, who worked at the mill, called out, Morning, Eliza. Selling to the right people today? It wasn't a friendly question. Selling to whoever wants to buy, Turner, same as always. That's so? Because some folks think you're playing favorites, making the rest of us second class. Nobody's second class. I've never turned down a sale in 17 years. Except you turned down common sense, another voice chimed in. Davis, the butcher. Man's got federal marshals asking about him, but you act like he's just some poor misunderstood soul. Rowan's hand moved to his belt, and Eliza realized with a jolt that he was checking for something that wasn't there. A weapon, maybe. Whatever he'd carried before, he wasn't carrying now. I'm not looking for trouble, Rowan said, his voice level but hard. Trouble found you anyway, Turner replied. Seems to follow you around. Seems to follow a lot of people. Doesn't make them guilty. Don't make them innocent either. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Eliza felt her pulse hammering. This was how things got ugly. Not with a bang, but with a slow escalation of words and posturing until someone crossed a line nobody could uncross. Turner, she said, keeping her voice steady. You want a pie or not? Not from someone who sides with outsiders over her own people. Then get off my spot. The men shifted. Not threatening exactly, but close. Close enough that Eliza felt Rowan move slightly, putting himself between her and them without making it obvious. Your spot? Turner laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is town property, Eliza. You just rent it by good behavior, and lately, your behavior's been less than good. My behavior's been the same as it's always been. Has it? Because I don't remember you ever telling the marshal to shove his questions. Don't remember you ever defending someone nobody knows against everyone who's lived here their whole lives. Before she could respond, Sam Brennan came out of his store. He looked at the gathered men, at Rowan, at Eliza, and his face went carefully neutral. Gentlemen, he said mildly, something I can help you with? Just making conversation, Sam. Looks more like intimidation. Does it? Turner smiled. Wasn't our intention. We're just concerned citizens, worried about one of our own making poor choices. Eliza's choices are her own business. Are they? When those choices affect the whole town, Sam stepped closer. He was older than most of the men gathered, but he had weight in the community. Respect. How exactly does Eliza selling pies to Rowan Hale affect the whole town? Because it says we tolerate people we can't trust. People who bring federal trouble. People who haven't been charged with anything, Sam interrupted. Far as I know, Marshal Porter left without making an arrest, without even making an accusation. So unless you've got evidence nobody else has, you're just running your mouth based on suspicion. The group wavered. Turner's face darkened, but Sam's point had landed. Without proof, they were just bullies. And Ember Flats, for all its faults, didn't like bullies. Slowly, reluctantly, the men dispersed. Not far, they lingered in clusters up and down the street, but the immediate threat faded. Sam looked at Eliza. You all right? Fine. You sure? Because this isn't going away. People are worked up, scared maybe. And scared people do stupid things. I know. He glanced at Rowan, who'd stepped back but still looked ready to move. You staying out of trouble? Trying to. Try harder. For her sake, if not your own. Sam went back inside. The street slowly filled with morning traffic, people heading to work, to the store, to wherever people in small towns went when they had nowhere particular to be. But the atmosphere had changed. What had been wary before was hostile now. Eliza felt it like splinters under her skin. She sold 4 pies that morning, total. The worst day she'd had in years. Rowan bought his 2, then lingered. I meant what I said. I can leave. And I meant what I said. I'm not making decisions based on fear. Even when the fear's justified, she started packing up early. No point staying when nobody was buying. Is it? Justified, I mean. Should I be scared of you? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was rough. No, but you should be smart. And staying associated with me isn't smart. Probably not. But here we are. She finished packing, loaded her cart. Rowan stood watching, his expression unreadable. When she was done, he spoke again. Why are you doing this? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe because everyone's so certain they're right that it makes me want to prove them wrong. Maybe because I'm tired of living scared. Or maybe I'm just stubborn and stupid. She met his eyes. Take your pick. Could be all 3. Yeah, could be. She wheeled her cart home, feeling his gaze on her back the whole way. The next 3 days were worse. Her sales dropped to almost nothing. People she'd known for years crossed the street to avoid her. Mrs. Callahan stopped ordering her weekly custard pie. Even old Tom, loyal old Tom, who'd been buying peach pies since Eliza first set up shop, mumbled an apology and walked past. She was losing everything she'd built. And for what? For a man she barely knew? For principle? For stubbornness? She didn't know anymore. On the 4th day, she woke up and couldn't make herself get out of bed. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. The isolation, the judgment, the slow, grinding loss of a life she'd worked 17 years to build. She was still lying there when someone knocked on her door. For a moment, she considered not answering, but old habits died hard. She dragged herself up, pulled on a shawl, and opened the door. Rowan stood there, hat in hands, looking uncomfortable. You didn't come to your spot, he said. Wasn't feeling up to it. Because of yesterday. Yesterday, she'd sold 1 pie. A single pie to a traveler passing through who didn't know or care about town politics. The rest had sat on her table until noon, when she'd finally packed up and taken them home. She'd eaten apple pie for dinner and cherry pie for dessert, and thrown the rest away because they'd gone dry. Among other things, she said, I'm sorry. For what? You didn't do anything. Didn't I? I came here, made you an offer that got people talking, stuck around when I should have left. Seems like I did plenty. She leaned against the door frame, suddenly too tired to hold herself up properly. You know what's funny? I spent 17 years being invisible, doing my job, keeping my head down, not making waves, and it worked. I had a nice, quiet, stable life. Then you showed up and offered me something I didn't want, and I said no, and somehow that turned me into the town villain. How does that make sense? It doesn't. No, it really doesn't. They stood in silence. Eliza became aware that she was still in her nightdress, her hair a mess, her face probably showing every bit of her exhaustion. She should care about that. Couldn't quite manage it. I'm leaving, Rowan said finally. Okay. Not just your door, the town. I'll be gone by tomorrow. That got through her fog. You don't have to. Yes, I do. This isn't working. You're losing everything because of me, and I can't. He stopped, jaw tight. I won't be responsible for that. What if I don't want you to leave? Then you're being stubborn and stupid. Your words, not mine. Maybe, but they're still my words, my choice. Eliza. He said her name like a prayer or a curse. She couldn't tell which. I'm not worth this. Whatever you think you're defending, whatever point you're trying to make, I'm not worth losing your whole life over. That's not your call to make, isn't it? I'm the one causing the problem. Seems like it should be my call whether I remove myself from it. She stepped back, suddenly angry. Not at him exactly, but at everything. At the town for being small-minded, at herself for caring what they thought, at him for making her care about him when caring was the last thing she could afford. Fine, she said. Leave. Run away like you always do. I'm sure it'll solve everything. It'll solve this. Will it? Or will it just prove to everyone that they were right to chase you off? That suspicion and gossip and mob mentality work? I don't care what it proves. I care that you can go back to your life. What if I don't want that life anymore? The question surprised them both. Eliza hadn't meant to say it, hadn't even fully thought it until the words were out. But there it was, hanging in the air between them, the truth she'd been avoiding. She didn't want to go back. Back to invisible, back to safe, back to a life where she sold pies and kept quiet and never questioned anything because questioning meant risk. Rowan stared at her. What do you want then? I don't know, but not that. Not anymore. He took a step closer, then another. Until he was close enough that she could see the flecks of green in his gray-blue eyes, could smell the soap he used and the dust that seemed permanently embedded in his coat. You're making this very hard, he said quietly. Good. You made it hard for me. Fair's fair. He almost laughed. Almost. Whatever he was going to say got cut off by the sound of horses. Multiple horses, moving fast. They both turned to see a group of riders coming down the street. Not the marshal this time, but townsfolk. 6 men, all familiar faces. Turner in the lead. They stopped in front of Eliza's house. Turner dismounted, his face set in hard lines. Hail, he said. We need you to leave, now. I was planning to. Good. We'll escort you. Make sure you actually go. That's not necessary. We think it is. We've been patient, given you time. But you're causing problems for this town, and we're done tolerating it. Eliza stepped forward. He's on my property. You've got no right. We've got every right, Turner interrupted. We're protecting our town, our people. You want to defend him, that's your mistake. But we're not letting him stay another day. Rowan's hand found Eliza's arm, gentle but firm. It's all right. No, it's not. It is, he looked at Turner. Give me an hour to pack. I'll be gone. Half hour. Fine. The men remounted but didn't leave. Just sat there, waiting, making sure. Eliza felt rage boil up inside her, hot and fierce. This is wrong, she said. No, Turner replied. This is necessary. She watched Rowan walk toward the Mackenzie place, watched the riders follow at a distance, and felt something inside her break. Not shatter. Breaking implied pieces. This was more like dissolving, like the person she'd been was just coming apart. She went inside, made herself a cup of coffee she didn't drink, sat at her kitchen table and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do now. The knock came 20 minutes later. She opened the door expecting, she didn't know what. Another confrontation. More judgment. It was Sam Brennan, alone this time, looking older than his years. Can I come in? He asked. She stepped aside. He entered, took off his hat, held it in his hands like a man at a funeral. I tried to stop them, he said, for what it's worth. Told Turner this was wrong, but he's got people worked up. Convinced them Hale's dangerous. Is he? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Point is, the town's decided he is. And once a town decides something, it's hard to undecide it. Eliza poured him coffee. Neither of them would drink. So what now? Now you let him go. Let things settle. Give it time. Eventually people will forget and you can go back to... Don't, she interrupted. Don't tell me I can go back. I can't. Something's... Changed. I've changed. Sam set down his untouched cup. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But change isn't always good, Eliza. Sometimes it's just different. He left. Eliza sat alone in her kitchen, listening to the clock tick, feeling the minutes pass like stones dropping into water. 30 minutes. That's all Rowan had. All the town was giving him. 30 minutes to pack up whatever life he'd started to build here and disappear. She should let him. Should let him ride out and take his trouble with him. Should salvage what she could of her reputation and rebuild. It was the smart play. The safe play. She was so tired of playing it safe. She stood, grabbed her shawl, and walked outside. Down the street toward the Mackenzie place. People stared. Let them. The riders were still there, horses circling like buzzards. Rowan was loading his saddlebags, his movements efficient and practiced. A man who'd done this before, too many times before. Rowan, she called. He looked up. Surprise flickered across his face. You shouldn't be here. Probably not, but here I am. Turner moved his horse closer. This doesn't concern you anymore, Eliza. Doesn't it? You're running a man out of town based on nothing. That concerns me plenty. He brought this on himself. By existing? By buying pies? By fixing things and helping people? By being someone we can't trust. You mean someone you won't trust? There's a difference. Turner's face darkened. You really want to keep fighting this? Keep choosing him over all of us? And there it was, the ultimatum she'd been avoiding. Choose him or choose them. Decide. Now. Eliza looked at the gathered men, at Turner's righteous certainty, at Davis's uncomfortable shifting, like maybe he knew this was wrong but wouldn't say it. At the others, just following along because it was easier than standing out. Then she looked at Rowan, at the resignation in his eyes, the acceptance of yet another town deciding he didn't belong. She made her choice. I'm going with him, she said. The street went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. What? Turner stared at her like she'd lost her mind. I'm going with him, she repeated, louder this time. If he's leaving, I'm leaving too. Rowan's face went blank with shock. Eliza, no, you can't. I can. I am. You're throwing away everything for what? For me? You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're not what they think you are. I know you deserve better than this. And I know I'm done living in a place that would rather believe the worst about someone than ask a single question. She turned back to Turner. That answer your question? He looked like he'd been punched. You've lost your mind. Maybe, but it's mine to lose. She walked to her house, packed a bag while her hands shook, and walked back out to where Rowan still stood, frozen. She handed him her bag. I don't have a horse, she said. So unless you want me walking, you're going to have to share. His eyes searched her face, looking for doubt, maybe, or sense. He wouldn't find either. This is crazy, he said. Yeah, seems to be going around. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Rowan reached down, took her hand, and pulled her up behind him on his horse. They rode out of Ember Flats together while the whole town watched in stunned silence. And Eliza didn't look back. They rode for 2 hours before either of them spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either, more like shock, the kind that settles over you when you've done something so monumentally stupid that your brain needs time to process it. Eliza kept her arms wrapped around Rowan's waist, feeling the shift of his body as the horse picked its way across the rough terrain. She'd never been this close to a man before. Not like this. It made her aware of things she'd spent 17 years not thinking about. The solid warmth of another person, the rhythm of breathing that wasn't hers, the strange intimacy of shared motion. She tried not to think about what she'd just done. Left everything. Her house, her business, her entire life. For what? For a man she'd known less than a month? For principle? For some half-formed idea that standing up mattered more than standing still? The sun climbed higher. The landscape changed from scrub brush to rocky outcrops, then to sparse pine forest. Rowan seemed to know where he was going, which was more than Eliza could say. She had no plan, no destination. She just left. The reality of that hit her in waves. Each time she thought she'd accepted it, another wave crashed through. She'd actually done it, Left Ember Flats, left everything she knew. There's a stream about a mile ahead, Rowan said finally. His voice sounded rough, like he'd forgotten how to use it. We can water the horse. Rest. Okay. That was it, the extent of their conversation. Eliza felt the absurdity of it. She'd thrown her entire life away to follow this man, and they couldn't even manage small talk. The stream appeared like he'd promised, cutting through a small clearing surrounded by pine. Rowan dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands on her waist felt too personal, too real. She stepped away as soon as her feet hit ground. While he tended to the horse, Eliza walked to the stream and splashed cold water on her face. It helped clear some of the fog. Not much, but some. You should eat something, Rowan said behind her. Not hungry. Eat anyway. Going to be a long day. She turned to find him holding out something wrapped in cloth. One of her own pies. Apple from yesterday. He must have taken it when he packed. You kept that? She asked. Seemed wrong to leave it. She took it, bit into it, even though her stomach felt like lead. The pie tasted like ash. Everything tasted like ash. She forced herself to swallow anyway. Rowan sat on a rock near the water, not eating, just watching her with that unreadable expression he wore like armor. You can still go back, he said. No, I can't. Sure you can. We haven't gone that far. Tell them you changed your mind, that I forced you, or... I'm not lying about what happened. Then tell them the truth. That you made a mistake. Heat of the moment. They'll understand. Will they? Because I don't think they will. And even if they did, I don't think I could look at them the same way. She set down the half-eaten pie. You know what the worst part is? I thought I knew those people. Thought after 17 years I understood them. Turns out I didn't know them at all. Or maybe they didn't know themselves. People show you who they are when they're scared. Is that what you think this was? Fear? Mostly, yeah. Fear of the unknown. Fear of change. Fear that if they don't control who comes and goes, they'll lose what little they have. He picked up a small stone, tossed it into the stream. Can't really blame them for that. I can? I do. He almost smiled. You're angrier about it than I am. Someone should be. They lapsed into silence again. Eliza finished the pie because it seemed wasteful not to, then walked along the stream's edge, trying to wrap her mind around her new reality. She had no home, no business, no plan. Just the clothes in her bag and the man sitting on that rock, who she'd defended without fully understanding why. Where are we going? She asked finally. Don't know yet. That's not reassuring. Wasn't trying to be reassuring, was trying to be honest. She turned to look at him properly. He sat hunched forward, elbows on knees, looking at the water like it held answers. He looked tired, worn down, like her leaving with him had cost him something he couldn't afford to pay. You didn't want me to come, she said. Not a question. No. Why not? Because now when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, it's not just me dealing with it. It's you too, and that's... He stopped, jaw working. That's not something I wanted to carry. I can take care of myself. Can you? Because from where I'm sitting, you just gave up everything on impulse. That's not exactly careful thinking. The words stung because they were true. Eliza felt heat rise in her face. So what was I supposed to do? Stay and pretend everything was fine? Sell pies to people who'd just run you out of town like you were diseased? Yes, exactly that. You were supposed to survive. That's what smart people do. They survive. Well, maybe I'm tired of just surviving. Maybe I want something more than that. Like what? Riding around the territory with a man you barely know, no money, no plan, no idea where your next meal's coming from? That's your idea of more? She crossed her arms. Right now, yes, it is. He stood abruptly, and she saw something flash in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or frustration. You don't know what you're talking about. You've lived in one town your whole adult life. You've had stability, routine, safety. You have no idea what you just walked away from. Don't I? I know what I walked away from. What I don't know is what I'm walking toward. But at least I'm walking. At least I'm making a choice instead of just letting life happen to me. This isn't a choice. This is a reaction. So what if it is? At least it's my reaction. At least I did something. They stared at each other across the clearing, the air between them charged with something neither knew how to name. Fear. anger, confusion, all of it tangled together into something combustible. Rowan broke first, turned away, ran a hand through his hair. This was a mistake. Probably. You should hate me for this. I don't. You will. Eventually. When reality sets in and you realize what you've done. Maybe. But that's tomorrow's problem. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something in his face shift. Recognition, maybe. Of stubbornness matching stubbornness. Of two people who'd both made choices they couldn't take back. We should keep moving, he said finally. Still a lot of ground to cover before dark. They rode through the afternoon, the silence less brittle now, but still present. Eliza watched the landscape change. More trees, steeper hills, the occasional glimpse of mountains in the distance. She'd never been this far from Ember Flats, had never wanted to be. Now here she was, moving farther with each step of the horse, and the terror of it was almost exhilarating. By evening they reached a small town. Smaller than Ember Flats, just a cluster of buildings around a crossroads. Rowan stopped at the edge, studying it like it might attack. We need supplies, he said. And you need proper riding gear. Can't have you in a dress on horseback for days. I don't have money for... I do. Not much, but enough. They rode in slowly. A few people looked up, noted them, went back to their business. Nobody seemed particularly interested, which Eliza found both relieving and strange. After weeks of being watched in Ember Flats, anonymity felt foreign. Rowan tied the horse outside a general store and helped her down. Inside, the place smelled like leather and tobacco and something sharp she couldn't identify. The shopkeeper, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back tight, looked them over with shrewd eyes. Help you? She asked. Need trail gear, Rowan said. Pants, shirt, boots. For her. The woman's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't comment, just gestured for Eliza to follow her to a back section where men's clothing hung on pegs. These'll fit better than the regular stock, the woman said, pulling down canvas pants and a heavy cotton shirt. Had them made for my daughter before she decided ranch life wasn't for her. Should be about your size. Eliza took them, feeling strange. She'd worn dresses her entire life. The idea of pants felt almost scandalous. There's a curtain back there if you want to try them on, the woman added, not unkindly. In the small space behind the curtain, Eliza changed. The pants felt odd, freeing but exposing at the same time. The shirt hung loose but comfortable. When she emerged, both the shopkeeper and Rowan turned to look. The woman nodded approvingly. Good fit. Boots next. Rowan said nothing, but something in his expression had changed. He looked at her like he was seeing someone different than the woman who'd stood behind a pie table every morning. Maybe he was. They left with new clothes, supplies, and considerably less money. Rowan found them a spot to camp outside town, far enough to be private, close enough to reach if they needed help, which Eliza hoped they wouldn't. Building a fire felt surreal. She'd cooked over a stove her entire life. This was different, raw, immediate, dependent on skills she didn't have. Rowan handled it without fuss, efficient movements that spoke to practice. You've done this a lot, she observed. Yeah. How long were you moving around before Ember Flats? 2 years, give or take. And before that, he poked at the fire, not looking at her. Before that, I worked for a mining company, the kind that doesn't care much about regulations or safety or who they have to pay off to keep operating. I was the one doing the paying off, bribes, threats, whatever it took to keep the operation running. Why'd you leave? Because I watched a man die. Cave-in, totally preventable. We'd known the supports were bad for weeks, but fixing them would have cost money and time. Company didn't want to spend either, so we didn't fix them. And a man named Joseph Carr, father of 3, got crushed when the whole thing came down. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. I handed his widow an envelope with blood money and told her the company was sorry for her loss, Rowan continued, his voice flat. She threw it at me, called me a murderer. And she was right. I didn't swing the pickaxe that brought down the rock, but I helped create the conditions that killed him. So I left. Took what savings I had and just started moving. Eliza pulled her knees to her chest, processing. That's what you meant about becoming someone you couldn't recognize. That's what I meant. Do you still see him, Joseph Carr? Every time I close my eyes. She wanted to say something comforting, something that would make it better. But what could she say? That it wasn't his fault? It was, at least partially, that he'd suffered enough. No amount of suffering brought Joseph Carr back to his family, so she just sat with him in the quiet, watching the fire burn, and let that be enough. They shared a simple meal, beans and hardtack Rowan had in his supplies, washed down with water from the stream. It wasn't good, but it was food. Eliza found herself grateful for it in a way she'd never been grateful for her own cooking. "Tomorrow, we'll head toward Redstone," Rowan said, scraping out his tin plate. "It's a bigger town, couple days' ride. Should be able to find work there, both of us." "What kind of work?" "Whatever we can get. You can bake, I can do labor. Between us, we'll manage." The practicality of it helped, having a destination, a plan, something concrete to move toward. Eliza latched onto it like a lifeline. "Okay," she said. "Redstone." They settled in for the night, Rowan giving her his bedroll and taking just a blanket for himself near the fire. Eliza protested, but he was immovable. "You're not used to sleeping rough," he said. "Take the bedroll." She did, but sleep didn't come easy. Every sound seemed amplified. The wind through the trees, the fire popping, the horse shifting nearby. And underneath it all, the awareness that she was lying under the stars with nothing but canvas between her and the sky, farther from home than she'd ever been. She must have slept eventually because she woke to gray dawn light and the smell of coffee. Rowan was already up, tending the fire, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "Morning," he said when he noticed her stirring. "Morning." He handed her a tin cup of coffee, weak but hot. She wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. They broke camp in silence, packed everything with the efficiency of people who'd run out of words. Or maybe just didn't need them right now. The ride to Redstone took 3 days. 3 days of riding, camping, minimal conversation. 3 days of Eliza's body adjusting to the constant motion, the new clothes, the outdoor sleeping. She got blisters from the new boots. Her back ached from the saddle. Her hands cracked from the cold night air. But something else happened too. Something she didn't expect. She started to feel alive. Not happy exactly, not content, but present in a way she hadn't been in years. Every sense felt sharper. The smell of pine, the sound of wind, the taste of simple food earned through effort. She'd spent so long in routine that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be uncertain, to not know what came next. It was terrifying. It was also kind of thrilling. On the 3rd day, they crested a hill and saw Redstone spread out below. A proper town, bigger than Ember Flats, with actual streets and 2-story buildings and what looked like a church steeple rising above the rest. "There it is," Rowan said. Eliza felt her stomach knot. This was it, the test. Could they actually make this work? Could she survive outside the small world she'd built for herself? They rode into town slowly, drawing a few looks, but nothing like the scrutiny in Ember Flats. Here, strangers were common enough not to warrant much attention. Rowan found a boarding house run by a man named Curtis, gruff but fair, who quoted them a weekly rate that made Eliza's remaining money evaporate in her mind. "We'll take it," Rowan said before she could object. 1 week to start. Curtis showed them to a room. Single room, 1 bed, barely big enough for the furniture it contained. Eliza's face went hot. "I can sleep on the floor," Rowan said quickly, reading her expression. "It's fine. We'll figure it out." They dropped their bags and went out to find work. Rowan tried the lumber mill first. They were hiring, but only for experienced sawyers. The blacksmith needed help, but wanted someone who could commit to a year at minimum. The stable owner took one look at Rowan and offered him mucking work at wages that barely covered food. Eliza had better luck. A restaurant owner named Margaret was looking for kitchen help. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and she'd provide 1 meal a day as part of the arrangement. "You know your way around an oven?" Margaret asked. "I do." "Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes." Just like that, Eliza had a job. It felt too easy, which made her suspicious, but she didn't question it. Rowan ended up taking the stable work. Pride swallowed, dignity checked at the door. When they met up that evening, both exhausted from walking the town all day, they compared notes. "Between us, we'll make enough," Rowan said, doing math in his head. "Barely, but enough." "For how long?" "As long as we need to." That night, sleeping on opposite sides of the room, her on the bed, him on the floor despite her protests, Eliza stared at the ceiling and tried to process her new reality. She was a kitchen worker in a town she didn't know, sleeping in a room with a man she barely understood, with no safety net and no way back. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something else. Something that took her a while to name. Hope. Small, fragile, possibly stupid. But there. The next morning she started at the restaurant. Margaret put her to work immediately. Bread baking, pie preparation, vegetable chopping. The kitchen was hot and cramped and smelled like grease and yeast and hard work. Eliza fell into it like coming home. By noon, she'd made 3 pies. By evening, she'd made 6 more. Margaret watched from the corner of her eye, nodding approval. "You weren't lying about knowing your way around an oven," she said. "No, ma'am." "Where'd you learn?" "Practice. Lots of practice." Margaret didn't push for more, which Eliza appreciated. She worked through the dinner rush, serving up portions, managing orders, moving through the controlled chaos with growing confidence. When she finally left, well after dark, her feet ached and her back hurt, and she smelled like cooking oil. Rowan was waiting outside, leaning against the wall, looking equally exhausted. He smelled like horses and hay. "How was it?" he asked. "Good. Hard, but good." They walked back to the boarding house in comfortable silence. This was new, the ease of existing next to each other without needing to fill the space with words. Inside their room, they took turns at the wash basin, changing for sleep with carefully averted eyes. The awkwardness of shared space was getting easier, but it still had edges. "Rowan?" Eliza said, once they'd settled, her on the bed, him on his makeshift floor pallet. "Yeah? Thank you for—" She struggled to find words. "For not making this harder than it has to be." "Same to you." Silence fell. Eliza thought he'd fallen asleep until he spoke again. "Eliza?" "Yeah? Why'd you really leave? And don't say it was about principle or standing up or any of that. What was the real reason?" She thought about lying, giving him the easy answer. But they'd gone too far for easy answers. "Because I was disappearing," she said, finally. "In Ember Flats, I was just fading, going through motions without really living. And when you showed up, when they all turned on me for not turning on you, I realized I had a choice. I could keep fading, or I could do something different, even if that something was stupid and reckless and possibly the worst decision of my life." She paused. "Your turn. Why'd you really let me come? You could have refused, ridden away without me." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because nobody's ever chosen me before. Everyone I've known, they've tolerated me or used me or run me off. But you chose me, actually chose, and I didn't have it in me to refuse that." The admission hung in the dark between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away, throat tight. "We're both idiots," she said. "Yeah, we really are." But neither of them sounded like they regretted it. The days fell into rhythm. Eliza worked at the restaurant, 6 days a week, dawn to dusk, earning her keep 1 pie at a time. Rowan worked at the stable, then picked up additional shifts at the lumber mill when they needed extra hands. They were both exhausted constantly, but they were surviving. More than surviving, actually. They were building something, small and fragile, but real. On their one shared day off, they'd walk around Redstone. Not shopping, they couldn't afford that. Just walking. Learning the town, finding the good spots, the quiet park near the church, the overlook where you could see the whole valley, the corner store that sold day-old bread at half price. 3 weeks in, Margaret promoted Eliza to head baker. More responsibility, marginally more pay, but the respect that came with it felt worth more than money. People started recognizing her in town. The restaurant's pies got a reputation. Customers asked for them specifically. Rowan noticed, saw how she came home less exhausted, more energized, how she'd talk about her day with actual animation instead of flat recitation. "You're good at this," he said one evening. "At what?" "At finding your footing, at making something out of nothing." "Learned from watching you." He shook his head. "I'm still figuring it out. You've already got it figured." She wanted to argue but couldn't, because somewhere in the chaos of leaving and traveling and starting over, she had found her footing. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but she'd found it. A month into their stay in Redstone, trouble found them anyway. Eliza was closing up the restaurant when she heard shouting outside. Not unusual. Redstone had its share of drunks and disagreements. But something about this felt different. She looked out to see a crowd gathering near the stable. Her stomach dropped. She ran. By the time she got there, a circle had formed. In the center, Rowan faced off against two men, both bigger than him, both drunk, both looking for a fight. "I said I wasn't interested," Rowan was saying, his voice level but hard. "And I said you don't have a choice," one of the men slurred. "Boss wants to talk to you, so you're coming." "What boss?" "The kind who doesn't like being questioned." Eliza pushed through the crowd. "What's going on?" Rowan's eyes flicked to her, then back to the men. "Nothing, just a misunderstanding." "Doesn't look like nothing." One of the men laughed. "This your woman? She's pretty. Maybe we'll take her too." The shift in Rowan was instant. Not loud, not obvious, but there. A tightening, a readying. The crowd felt it too. The air went tense. "Walk away," Rowan said quietly. "Right now. Before this becomes something you regret." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. Take it." For a moment, it could have gone either way. Then the second man, slightly less drunk than the first, grabbed his friend's arm. "Come on, Jake. Not worth it." They left, throwing insults over their shoulders. The crowd dispersed, disappointed. Violence averted, drama over. Rowan stood there, breathing hard, hands clenched. Eliza waited until they were alone. "What was that about?" "Don't know. They work for someone named Garrett. Runs things in this part of town, apparently. Wanted to talk." "About what?" "Probably about whether I'm willing to work for him, or whether I'm a problem he needs to solve." "And are you?" "A problem?" He looked at her. Really looked. "I hope not. But with my track record, it's hard to say." That night, neither of them slept well. The confrontation had stirred something up, reminded them both that peace was fragile, that trouble could find you even when you weren't looking for it. 2 days later, a wagon overturned in the street right in front of the restaurant. Not an accident. A wheel had broken, spilling lumber everywhere, blocking traffic completely. People gathered, complaining, but nobody moved to help. Rowan was passing by. Saw it. Didn't hesitate. He waded into the mess, started shifting lumber, organizing the cleanup. Others joined in once he started. Something about seeing one person take action made it easier for others to follow. Within 20 minutes, the street was clear, the wagon owner was grateful, and traffic was moving again. Eliza watched from the restaurant window. Saw how people looked at him afterward, not with suspicion or fear, but with something like respect. He'd helped. Asked nothing in return. Just helped because it needed doing. That evening, 3 different people stopped by the restaurant asking who that man was, the one who'd cleared the street. Margaret answered each time, "That's Rowan Hale, he works at the stable." Just like that, Rowan became a name instead of a stranger. The next week, he helped an elderly woman carry groceries to her house. The week after, he fixed a broken fence for a family who couldn't afford to hire someone. Small things, unremarkable things. But they added up. People started nodding to him in the street, stopped treating him like an outsider. The stable owner gave him a raise, small, but acknowledgement nonetheless. Eliza watched it happen and felt something complex in her chest. Pride, maybe? Or vindication. She'd been right about him. Not that he was perfect or without past mistakes, but that underneath the wariness and the walls, there was someone worth knowing. She'd thrown away her life for that bet. Looked like she might have won. 6 weeks into their stay in Redstone, Rowan came home with news. "Garrett wants to meet," he said. Eliza looked up from the bread dough she was kneading. "The man from the stable?" "Yeah. Sent word he wants to talk. No threats this time, just talk." "Are you going?" "Probably should. Better to know what he wants than keep wondering." "I'm coming with you." "Eliza, I'm coming. Not negotiable." They went together the next evening. Garrett's office was above a saloon, well-furnished, expensive, the kind of place that made statements about power and money. Garrett himself was mid-40s, well-dressed, with the kind of polish that came from success. He looked them over with sharp eyes. "Mr. Hale," he said, "and this must be Miss Voss. I've heard about your pies." "From who?" Eliza asked. "From everyone. Apparently Margaret's restaurant has doubled its dinner crowd since you started. That's impressive." "Thank you." He gestured for them to sit. They did, warily. I'll be direct, Garrett said. I'm always looking for people who add value, who make things better. You both seem to fit that description. What are you offering? Rowan asked. Work. Real work. Better than mucking stables or kitchen prep. I've got interests in timber, freight, real estate. Always need reliable people. People who can solve problems. What kind of problems? Garrett smiled. The kind that require judgment and discretion, which you both seem to have. It was a good offer. Too good. Which meant there was a catch. What's the real ask? Eliza said. Garrett's smile widened. Smart woman. The real ask is simple. I need people I can trust. People who aren't tied to the local families and their endless grudges. You're both outsiders. That makes you valuable. And if we say no, then you say no. I'm not in the business of forcing people. But I will say this, Redstone's not as simple as it looks. There are factions, rivalries, people jockeying for position. Having someone like me on your side makes life considerably easier. They left without giving an answer, walked back to their boarding house in heavy silence. What do you think? Rowan asked. I think it sounds too good, which means it probably is. Yeah, that's what I think too. But they both knew they'd consider it, because survival wasn't just about making enough money, it was about making the right alliances. And in a town like Redstone, having powerful friends might be the difference between thriving and just scraping by. That night, lying in their respective spaces in the dark, Eliza spoke. Are we making the same mistakes all over again? What do you mean? Running from one complicated situation into another, trading one set of problems for different problems. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Maybe. Or maybe we're just learning to navigate complications instead of hiding from them. Is there a difference? I don't know. But I'm tired of hiding, tired of running. If we're going to build something here, might as well build it right. Even if that means dealing with people like Garrett. Especially if it means that. Because people like Garrett run the world. Hiding from them doesn't change that. But maybe working with them, on our terms, maybe that's how we survive. Eliza thought about that. About survival versus living, about compromises and principles and the messy space between them. Okay, she said finally, but we set boundaries. We don't do anything that crosses lines we can't uncross. Agreed. Neither of them mentioned that they'd already crossed lines they couldn't uncross. That leaving Ember Flats, riding out together, building this fragile new life, all of it was irreversible. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some lines were worth crossing. They gave Garrett their answer 3 days later. Not yes, but not no either. A conditional maybe that depended on what exactly he needed from them. Turned out what he needed was surprisingly mundane. Rowan would oversee shipments coming through the freight depot, making sure loads were properly counted, secured, delivered on time. Honest work, just better paid. Eliza would supply baked goods for a new establishment Garrett was opening, a higher-end restaurant aimed at drawing visitors from neighboring towns. Again, legitimate. Again, better money. See? Garrett said when they accepted. Nothing sinister, just business. But Eliza saw the calculation in his eyes. He wasn't hiring them for their skills alone. He was investing in goodwill, building loyalty, creating obligations that could be called in later. She recognized it because she'd seen it before. In Ember Flats, in every small town where power worked through favors and debts rather than outright force. The difference was, this time she went in knowing it. The work changed things. Better pay meant they could afford a bigger room at the boarding house. Still one room, but with actual space to move around. It meant regular meals instead of scraping by. It meant Eliza could replace her worn boots and Rowan could get his coat repaired instead of just living with the torn sleeve. Small improvements. But they accumulated into something that felt almost like stability. 3 months into their stay in Redstone, Eliza realized she'd stopped thinking about Ember Flats every day. The ache of leaving had dulled to a distant bruise. Still there if she pressed on it, but easy to ignore most of the time. She wondered if the town thought about her. Probably not. Small towns had short memories for people who left. They'd have found someone else to buy pies from, filled the gap she'd left, moved on. Maybe they talked about her sometimes, the woman who threw everything away for a stranger. Maybe they used her as a cautionary tale. She tried not to care. Mostly succeeded. Rowan seemed to be settling too. The tension he'd carried when they first arrived had eased. He smiled more. Not often, but more. Joked occasionally with the men at the depot. Stopped looking over his shoulder quite so much. They'd fallen into routines that felt almost domestic. He'd wake first, get the fire going in the small stove Curtis had let them have in their room. She'd make coffee while he shaved. They'd eat breakfast together, usually bread she'd brought from work and whatever else they'd scrounged, then head out in opposite directions. Evenings, they'd reconvene, share their days in shorthand that had become its own language. Garrett's opening got delayed meant something different than Garrett's opening got delayed would have meant to anyone else. They both heard the subtext, the implications, the potential complications. It was partnership, functional, practical, built on shared circumstance rather than romance or grand declarations. It worked. Until the night Eliza came home to find Rowan sitting in the dark, blood on his knuckles, looking like he'd seen a ghost. She stopped in the doorway. What happened? Nothing. That's obviously not true. He looked up and she saw it in his eyes. Something had cracked. There was a man at the depot. Came asking questions about shipments. Wanted to know what we were moving, when, to who. I told him to take it up with Garrett. He got pushy. And you hit him. After he grabbed my shirt, yeah. I hit him. Eliza closed the door, set down her bag, moved into the room slowly. Is he hurt bad? Broken nose, maybe. Nothing worse. Is he going to report it? Rowan laughed, bitter. Probably not. Turns out he works for Coleman. The name meant nothing to Eliza. Who's Coleman? Garrett's rival. Owns the other freight company. Been trying to undercut his prices. This was intimidation. Fishing for information they could use. And you gave them a broken nose instead. Yeah, which means Coleman now has ammunition. Can claim Garrett's people are violent. Can make trouble. He stood, paced to the window. I keep doing this. Keep making things worse without meaning to. You defended yourself. That's not making things worse. Isn't it? Because now Garrett's going to have to respond, and Coleman will respond to that. And before you know it, we're in the middle of a war I didn't even know we were fighting. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, processing. This was the catch. The hidden cost of Garrett's good offer. He hadn't hired them for simple work. He'd hired them because he was building an operation, and operations needed soldiers. What do you want to do? She asked. I don't know. Leave, maybe, before this gets complicated. It's already complicated. Leaving won't undo what happened tonight. No, but staying means we're choosing sides. We're saying we're Garrett's people. And I've seen how this ends, Eliza. I've been on losing sides before. She thought about Ember Flats, about the choice she'd made there, to stand with him instead of with the town. This was different, but similar. Choose safety or choose principle. Choose easy or choose right. Except this time, she wasn't sure which was which. Let's talk to Garrett first, she said finally. Find out what he expects, then we decide. Rowan nodded, but he didn't look convinced. They met with Garrett the next morning. His office felt colder than before, more formal. He listened to Rowan's account without interrupting, his face unreadable. Coleman's testing boundaries, Garrett said when Rowan finished. This isn't about you specifically. You were just convenient. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand the situation. Coleman wants my routes, wants my contracts. He's been making moves for months, lowballing prices, spreading rumors, pressuring my suppliers. This was just another move. So what now? Eliza asked. Garrett leaned back in his chair. Now we show him that moves have consequences. Nothing dramatic, just measured response. What kind of response, Ian? That depends. Are you both still in? Because if you are, I need to know you're committed. Can't have people working for me who are going to bolt at the first sign of trouble. There it was. The real question. The line they'd have to cross or step back from. Rowan looked at Eliza. She looked back. In that moment, they had an entire conversation without words, weighing options, calculating risks, trying to figure out what the smart play was. We're in, Eliza said, surprising herself. But we're not doing anything illegal, and we're not hurting anyone who doesn't deserve it. Garrett smiled. I wouldn't ask you to. I'm a businessman, not a thug. All I need is for you both to keep doing what you're doing. Show up, do good work, be visible. Let Coleman know that his intimidation didn't work. It sounded reasonable, almost too reasonable. That's it? Rowan asked. That's it. For now. They left feeling like they'd agreed to something they didn't fully understand. But they'd agreed, which meant backing out would be harder from here on. The next week was tense. Eliza kept expecting trouble, Coleman's people showing up at the restaurant, confrontations in the street, something. But nothing happened. Life continued as normal, which was somehow more unsettling than drama would have been. She threw herself into work. Garrett's new restaurant was opening in 2 weeks, and she'd committed to providing all the baked goods for the opening night. It meant long hours, early mornings, late nights. She barely saw Rowan except in passing. When she did see him, he looked tired, worn down. The depot work was harder now, not physically, but mentally. Constant vigilance, watching for problems, trying to prevent incidents before they happened. "You need to rest," she told him one evening, finding him hunched over paperwork at their small table. "Can't. Shipment tomorrow is double size, needs to be perfect." "It will be. You're good at this." He looked up and she saw doubt in his eyes. "Am I? Because it feels like I'm one mistake away from everything falling apart." "That's always true. For everyone. You're just more aware of it." "That's not comforting." "Wasn't trying to be comforting. Was trying to be honest." He almost smiled. "You're good at that." "One of my few skills." The moment stretched. They'd been living together for months now, sharing space, building this strange partnership. But there was still distance between them. Careful boundaries neither had tried to cross. Eliza wondered sometimes what would happen if they did cross them, if they stopped being partners in survival and became something more. But the wondering always ran into the same wall. They'd built this on necessity, not choice, on circumstance, not feeling. Changing that foundation seemed dangerous, so she stayed on her side of the invisible line, and he stayed on his. The restaurant opening was a success. Eliza's pies were the highlight. People couldn't stop talking about them. Garrett made a point of introducing her to everyone who mattered, building her reputation, making her visible. She should have been thrilled. This was recognition, respect, the kind of success she'd never had in Ember Flats. Instead, she felt uneasy, like she was being shown off, displayed, turned into an asset rather than a person. "You were incredible tonight," Rowan said when she finally made it home, exhausted and flour-stained. "Thanks." "That's it? Just thanks?" "Eliza, you had people lined up for those pies. Garrett told me 3 different businessmen asked for your name. You could start your own bakery with the connections you made tonight." "Could I? Or would I just be trading one person's control for another's?" He stopped, looked at her properly. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm just tired." She sat heavily on the bed, pulled off her boots. "Or maybe I'm realizing that no matter where we go, there's always someone like Garrett, someone who wants to own you, just in more polite ways. He's not, isn't he? Think about it. He hired us because we were useful, pays us enough to keep us loyal, but not enough to leave. Shows us off when it benefits him. We're assets, Rowan. Well-treated assets, but still." The words hung there, sharp and uncomfortable. Rowan sat in the chair across from her. "So what do you want to do?" "I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know what I want anymore. I wanted to be independent, but that didn't work. I wanted to be part of something, but that feels like giving up control. I wanted—" She stopped, frustrated. "I wanted something I can't even name." "Maybe you wanted to matter, to be seen as more than just what you can provide." The accuracy of it hit her like cold water. "Yeah, maybe that." They sat in silence, both too tired for solutions, too honest for comfort. Finally, Rowan spoke. "I see you, for whatever that's worth. Not as the baker or the asset or whatever Garrett thinks you are. I see you." Eliza felt her throat tighten. "I see you too." It wasn't a declaration, wasn't romance, just 2 people acknowledging that in the middle of all the chaos and compromise and survival, they'd somehow become real to each other. It was enough. For now. The next month brought changes. Garrett expanded his operation. More shipments, more restaurants, more people working for him. Rowan got promoted, shift supervisor, better pay, actual authority. Eliza got her own kitchen space in Garrett's flagship restaurant, complete with 2 assistants. They were succeeding. By any measure, they were doing better than they had any right to expect. But something was off. Eliza felt it in the way Garrett looked at them now. Not as employees, but as investments. in the way he'd casually mention other opportunities, other ways they could help, in the small requests that came more frequently, testing boundaries, seeing how far they'd stretch. It came to a head 3 weeks after the restaurant opening. Garrett called them both to his office. When they arrived, he wasn't alone. 2 men Eliza didn't recognize sat in the corner, well-dressed, watching everything with sharp eyes. "These are business associates from Denver," Garrett said. "They're interested in expanding their operations here. I told them about my best people." The men nodded. One spoke. "We're looking for reliable individuals, people who understand discretion." "Discretion about what?" Rowan asked. "About shipments that need to move quietly, about storage that needs to stay private, about arrangements that benefit everyone involved." Eliza's stomach dropped. This was it. The line they'd said they wouldn't cross. "What exactly are you moving?" she asked. The man smiled. "Nothing illegal, just sensitive. Business materials that competitors would love to intercept. Documents, contracts, the kind of thing that needs protection." "That's all?" Rowan pressed. "That's all." But his eyes said different, and Garrett's careful neutrality said different. This was the test, the real commitment. Say yes, and they'd be in deeper than they could easily get out. Say no, and they'd burn bridges they'd spent months building. "We need time to think about it," Eliza said. Garrett's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or calculation. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need, but these gentlemen are only in town for 2 more days." Translation: decide fast, or lose the opportunity. They left without committing, walked back through Redstone's evening streets in heavy silence. "That wasn't business materials," Rowan said finally. "No. That was something else, something we don't want to be involved in." "I know." "So we say no." Eliza stopped walking. "Do we? Because saying no means losing everything we've built here. Garrett's not the forgiving type. He'll make things difficult." "Let him. We've survived difficult before." "Have we? Or have we just run from it?" The question hit harder than she intended. Rowan looked at her like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair," he said. "Isn't it? We left Ember Flats because things got hard. Now things are getting hard here, and you want to leave again. When do we stop running? When the thing we're running from is worth staying for, and this," he gestured at the town around them, "this isn't worth compromising ourselves over. You don't know that. You don't know what they're really asking." "I know enough. I know that men who talk about discretion and sensitive materials are talking about something they don't want seen in daylight. And I'm done being part of things that only work in shadows." They made it back to their room still arguing. Not yelling, they never yelled, but the tension was thick enough to choke on. "I'm not saying we should say yes," Eliza tried to explain. "I'm saying we should find out more before we decide." "Why? What could they possibly tell us that would make it okay?" "I don't know. But I'm tired of making decisions based on assumptions and fear. I want facts. I want to actually know what we're saying no to." "You want to feel less guilty about walking away from money." "That's not—" She stopped, because maybe it was. Maybe part of her did want that. "We could use the money, Rowan. We could save enough to actually start something of our own. Open a real bakery, stop working for someone else. At what cost? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out." He sat on the bed, head in his hands. "I can't do this again. Can't compromise myself for money or security or whatever we're calling it. That's what I was doing before, and it destroyed me. I won't go back to that." Eliza felt her anger drain away, replaced by something sadder. "I'm not asking you to. I'm trying to find a way forward that doesn't involve running every time things get complicated. Some complications aren't worth navigating. And some are. How do we know which is which?" He looked up at her, and she saw exhaustion there. Not just physical, soul deep. "I don't know anymore. I used to think I had good instincts about this stuff, but I've been wrong so many times that I don't trust myself." "Then trust me." "I do trust you. But I also know you want stability so badly that you might convince yourself something's acceptable when it's not." The words stung because they were true. Eliza did want stability. Wanted it desperately. Wanted to stop feeling like her life was built on sand, ready to shift at any moment. "So what do we do?" she asked quietly. "We tell them no, we walk away, we figure out something else. And if there is no something else, then we leave Redstone. Start over somewhere new. Again. Again. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away, angry at herself for crying, angry at the situation, angry at everything. I'm tired of starting over, she said. Me too. Then why are we doing it? Because it's better than the alternative. They sat in their separate silences, two people who'd thrown everything away for each other but couldn't seem to find solid ground together. The next morning, they told Garrett no. His reaction was measured, a slight tightening around the eyes, a nod that acknowledged their decision without accepting it. I understand, he said. It's not for everyone. We appreciate the opportunity, Rowan said, formal and careful. Of course. You'll continue in your current positions naturally, no hard feelings. But there were hard feelings. Eliza saw them in the way Garrett's demeanor shifted, still professional but cooler, more distant. They'd failed a test they hadn't known they were taking. The consequences came slowly. Not dramatic, Garrett was too smart for that, just small erosions. Rowan's hours got cut at the depot. Eliza's kitchen space got reassigned to someone else, forcing her back to the main kitchen. The good assignments went to other people. The raises they'd been promised got delayed. Nothing actionable. Nothing they could complain about without looking petty. Just the slow squeeze of someone making their displeasure known. We could fight this, Eliza said one evening, after learning her hours were being reduced again. We could, but we'd lose. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Garrett owns too much of this town. Fighting him means fighting everyone who depends on him, and that's most of Redstone. He was right, which made it worse. 2 months after they'd said no to the Denver men, they were barely scraping by again. Right back where they'd started, except now with the knowledge of what they'd had and lost. Curtis, the boarding house owner, found Eliza in the kitchen one evening. She was washing dishes, her turn on the rotation for residents who couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. Got a letter for you, he said, holding out an envelope. Eliza dried her hands, took it. No return address, but the handwriting looked familiar. She opened it carefully. Inside, a single page. Sam Brennan's handwriting. Eliza, word reached us about your situation in Redstone. If you're interested, there's a place for you back here. Things have changed. People have had time to think. Not saying it'll be easy, but the door's not closed. Think about it. Sam. She read it 3 times, each time feeling something different. Relief, anger, hope, resentment. All tangled together into something she couldn't name. What is it? Rowan asked, coming in from his own evening shift. She handed him the letter, watched his face as he read it. They want you back, he said. Us. The letter says you, but means us. Does it? Because I don't think the town that ran me out is suddenly going to welcome me home. Maybe not, but they might tolerate you if it means getting me back. He handed her the letter. What do you want to do? I asked you that question once. You said we leave, start over. Now I'm asking again. What do you want? Rowan was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I want to stop running. Want to find a place where we're not just surviving, but actually living. Where we matter because of who we are, not what we provide. Where we're not constantly looking over our shoulders or testing boundaries or wondering when the other shoe will drop. That place doesn't exist. Then maybe we create it. Maybe we go back to Ember Flats and make them see us different. Make them understand that we're not problems to solve or mistakes to correct. We're just people trying to build something. You think they'll listen? I think if we don't try, we'll regret it. Eliza looked at the letter again. At Sam's careful words, his tentative invitation. It wasn't much, but it was something. Okay, she said. We go back. You sure? No. But I'm sure I can't keep doing this. Can't keep starting over in new places, hoping the next town will be different. If we're going to make something work, might as well be somewhere we already know the complications. Rowan moved closer. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the familiar scent of work and dust and exhaustion that clung to both of them. Whatever happens, he said, we face it together. Not me protecting you or you defending me. Together. Together, she agreed. They gave their notice to Garrett, to Curtis, to the restaurant, packed their belongings, more now than when they'd arrived, but still fitting into 2 bags, settled their debts, and said their goodbyes. Redstone had been good to them, then hard on them, then impossible. But they'd survived it, learned from it, come out different than they went in. On their last morning, they walked through town one final time, saw the places they'd worked, the spots they'd found, the life they'd almost built. Any regrets? Rowan asked. Dozens. You? Same. But you'd do it again? He thought about that. Yeah, I would, because it taught me something. What's that? That running doesn't solve anything. It just moves the problems around. Real change happens when you stop moving and start building. They mounted the horse. Rowan had saved enough to buy it outright before they left, a small victory, and turned toward the road that led back to Ember Flats. Back to the beginning. Back to the town that had driven them out. But this time, they weren't running, they were choosing, and that made all the difference. The ride back to Ember Flats took 4 days. 4 days of Eliza second-guessing every decision that had led them to this point. The landscape felt familiar, but foreign at the same time. Like walking through a house you used to live in, recognizing the shape of things but not quite feeling like they belonged to you anymore. Rowan didn't talk much, just kept the horse moving, steady and deliberate, like if they stopped too long they'd lose the nerve to continue. On the third night, camped near a stream that Eliza recognized from the trip out, she finally voiced what had been circling in her head. What if this is a mistake? Rowan looked up from the fire he was tending. Then it's our mistake. We'll deal with it. That's not reassuring. Wasn't trying to be. Was trying to be realistic. He poked at the fire, sending sparks up into the dark. Every choice we've made has been a mistake by someone's measure. Leaving was a mistake to the town. Staying in Redstone would have been a mistake for us. Going back probably looks like weakness to people who don't understand. But here's the thing. I'm done making decisions based on how they look to other people. So why are we going back? Because Sam reached out, because you've got unfinished business there, because running away didn't solve anything, and maybe facing it will. He met her eyes across the fire. And because I'm tired of feeling like I don't belong anywhere. If I'm going to not belong, might as well be somewhere that at least knows my name. Eliza pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. The night was cold, autumn settling into the valley with teeth. They're not going to make this easy. Good. Easy hasn't taught us anything. She almost smiled at that. Almost. They reached Ember Flats just before noon on the 4th day. The town looked exactly the same. Same dust, same buildings, same feeling of being stuck in a moment that refused to move forward. But something was different too. Maybe it was them. Maybe it was the way they rode in. Not sneaking, not apologizing, just arriving. People noticed. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Eliza felt the weight of their staring, but this time it didn't make her want to disappear. This time she stared back. Sam Brennan was standing outside his store, like he'd been waiting. Maybe he had been. He raised a hand in greeting that was careful but not unfriendly. They stopped in front of him. Rowan dismounted first, then helped Eliza down. The gesture felt automatic now, easy in a way it hadn't been months ago. Sam, Eliza said. Eliza. Rowan. He nodded to both of them. Didn't know if you'd come. Almost didn't. But you did? We did. The awkwardness stretched. Sam cleared his throat. There's a room at Mrs. Callahan's if you need one. She's willing, if that matters. It does, Rowan said quietly. Good. That's good. Sam looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. Look, I'm not going to pretend things are just going to go back to normal. A lot of people are still angry, still don't trust him. He gestured at Rowan without quite looking at him. But some of us have been thinking about what happened, about whether we handled it right. And? Eliza asked. And we probably didn't. Doesn't mean we were completely wrong either, but we could have asked more questions, could have given him a chance to prove himself before running him off. Sam finally met Rowan's eyes. So I'm asking now, who are you really? And what do you want from this town? Rowan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. I'm someone who made a lot of mistakes, worked for people I shouldn't have, did things I'm not proud of, ran when I should have faced consequences. But I didn't rob any federal transport, didn't kill anyone. The marshal confirmed that, if you'd bothered to check after he left. Sam's face reddened slightly. We didn't know how to check. Could have asked. could have written to the marshal's office, could have done anything other than assume the worst. Rowan's tone wasn't angry, just tired. As for what I want to stop moving, want to build something that lasts, want to be somewhere I'm not constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Whether that's here or not, I don't know yet, but I'm willing to try if you are. The small crowd that had gathered, because of course there was a crowd, murmured. Eliza couldn't tell if it was approval or disapproval, probably both. Dutch pushed through to the front. He looked older than Eliza remembered, more worn down. You expect us to just forget you rode out of here with our baker? That you took her away from people who needed her? I didn't take her anywhere, Rowan said. She made her own choice. Did she? Or did you pressure her, manipulate her into thinking she had to choose? Eliza stepped forward. I'm standing right here, Dutch. You want to know why I left? Ask me. Don't act like I'm some helpless thing that got carried off. Dutch's jaw worked. Fine. Why'd you leave? Because you gave me no choice. Because you made it clear that standing by Rowan meant losing everything else. Because you chose fear over trust, and I couldn't live in a place that did that. She looked around at the gathered faces. I left because this town showed me exactly what it valued: comfort over courage, assumptions over questions, conformity over independence. And I didn't want to be part of that anymore. The words landed heavy. Some people looked ashamed. Others looked angry. A few, like Jenny Porter, looked away entirely. We were protecting ourselves, Turner said from somewhere in the back. Protecting our own. Were you? Or were you protecting your right to not have your opinions challenged? Eliza felt heat rising in her chest. You didn't protect me when you ran him off. You just made it clear that my choices only mattered if they aligned with yours. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me, Turner, did anyone ask me what I wanted? Did anyone try to understand why I was defending him? Or did you just assume I was being foolish and needed to be saved from myself? Silence, long and uncomfortable. Mrs. Callahan stepped forward. She looked at Eliza, then at Rowan, then back to Eliza. I owe you an apology, both of you. I let fear make me unkind. That's not who I want to be. It's who we all were, Sam said quietly. Fear makes people small, makes them mean. We were scared of change, scared of the unknown, scared of being wrong. So we circled the wagons and forced out anything that didn't fit. He looked at Rowan directly. I'm sorry for my part in that. Rowan nodded, accepting it without pretending it fixed everything. Others started to speak then. Some apologizing, some still defensive, some just wanting to understand what happened in the months they'd been gone. The crowd became a conversation, became something almost like reconciliation. Almost. Because Dutch wouldn't let it go. This is all fine words, he said, louder now, but words don't rebuild trust. He still hasn't proven he's worth trusting. What would prove it? Rowan asked. What do I need to do? I don't know, but until I see it, I'm not convinced. Fair enough. The response surprised Dutch. Surprised everyone, really. Rowan wasn't arguing, wasn't trying to force acceptance, just acknowledging the reality and moving on. The crowd dispersed slowly. Some people nodded to Eliza as they passed. A few even nodded to Rowan. Progress, maybe. Or just politeness. Hard to tell. Mrs. Callahan showed them to a room, bigger than the one they'd had in Redstone, with 2 actual beds. The luxury of separate sleeping spaces felt almost foreign now. Meals are included, Mrs. Callahan said. Breakfast at 7, dinner at 6. You're welcome at both. Thank you, Eliza said. Mrs. Callahan paused at the door. I really am sorry. About before. About, she struggled with the words, about being part of the group that made you feel like you had to leave. You didn't make me leave. You made staying impossible. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, one's active, one's passive, but they both have the same result. Mrs. Callahan left looking troubled. Eliza sat on one of the beds, feeling the exhaustion of the day settle into her bones. That went better than expected, Rowan said. Did it? Dutch still hates you. Half the town probably agrees with him. But half doesn't. That's more than we had before. Eliza wanted to argue, but couldn't. He was right. They'd come back expecting nothing and gotten something. Not acceptance, not forgiveness, but possibility. That was more than she'd dared hope for. The next morning, Eliza went to her old spot outside Brennan's store. Her table was gone. Someone had taken it or stored it, she didn't know which. But the space was still there, empty and waiting. Sam came out with a new table. Thought you might need this. I don't know if I'm staying yet. I know, but if you do, you'll need a table. They set it up together. Eliza ran her hand over the surface. Rough wood, nothing fancy. Not her old table, but it would do. People will come, Sam said. Maybe not everyone, maybe not right away, but they'll come. And if they don't, then we figure out plan B, but let's try plan A first. She went back to Mrs. Callahan's kitchen and spent the afternoon baking. 6 pies, apple, cherry, peach. The familiar motions felt strange after months of doing different work in different kitchens, but her hands remembered, even if her heart wasn't quite sure yet. The next morning, she set up the pies on the table and waited. For the first hour, nobody came. Just people passing by, looking, not stopping. Eliza felt the old familiar fear rising, that she'd made another mistake, that coming back was as stupid as leaving had been. Then old Tom appeared, looked at the pies, looked at her, didn't say anything, just pointed at the peach pie. $1.25, Eliza said, her voice rough from disuse. He paid exact change, took the pie, nodded once, and left. It wasn't much, but it was something. By noon, she'd sold 3 pies. By evening, 5. The 6th she brought home and shared with Rowan, sitting at the small table in their room. First day back, he said. How was it? Weird, hard, but not impossible. That's something. Yeah, that's something. The days settled into a pattern. Eliza baked and sold pies. Rowan found work at the lumber mill, not ideal, but honest. People slowly, cautiously began to acknowledge them. Not welcoming exactly, but not hostile either. A middle ground that felt fragile but real. Dutch remained the holdout. Wouldn't buy from Eliza, wouldn't work with Rowan, made his disapproval known in small ways that added up. Eliza tried not to let it bother her, mostly failed. 3 weeks after their return, a wagon broke down in the street. Not unusual, wagons broke down all the time, but this one was blocking the intersection, loaded with lumber, the wheel completely shattered. The driver stood there looking helpless. People gathered to watch, to complain, but nobody moved to help. Eliza recognized the pattern, everyone waiting for someone else to take the first step. Rowan stepped into the street. He assessed the damage, called out to a few men standing nearby. Need 4 people. We can lift it, get the wheel off, drag it out of the way. Nobody moved. The watching continued. Come on, Rowan said, his voice level but firm. Standing around won't fix it. Need hands. Still nothing. The town watching, testing, waiting to see what he'd do when faced with their collective resistance. Then Dutch moved, pushed through the crowd, walked up to the wagon, didn't look at Rowan, just positioned himself at the corner. Where do you want me? Rowan's surprise flickered across his face for just a second. There's good. Sam, you in? Sam stepped forward, then Billy Watts, looking eager to help, then Turner, reluctantly, but there. Together, they lifted. Shifted the wagon enough to get the broken wheel off, dragged the whole thing to the side of the street. It took 20 minutes of sweating and coordinating and actual teamwork. When it was done, Dutch finally looked at Rowan. Don't expect this to happen every time. Wouldn't dream of it. But you were right. Standing around complaining doesn't fix anything. No, it doesn't. Dutch walked away without another word. But something had shifted. Eliza saw it in the way people dispersed. Less tension, more thoughtfulness. Like they'd just witnessed something that changed the equation. That evening, Dutch showed up at Eliza's table just before closing, looked at the remaining pie, cherry. I'll take it, he said. Eliza wrapped it without comment, took his money, handed it over. I was wrong, Dutch said abruptly. About him. About you. About a lot of things. Okay, that's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say, Dutch? That it's fine? It's not fine. You made my life hell. You made his life hell. You drove us out of town based on fear and stubbornness. She looked at him directly. But you also just helped him when you didn't have to, so I don't know what that means yet. Give me time to figure it out. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. Fair enough. He left with his pie. Eliza packed up her table feeling like another piece had clicked into place. Not completion. They were far from that. But progress. The real test came a month later. A fire started in the boarding house kitchen. Not Mrs. Callahan's fault. A lamp got knocked over, caught the curtains, spread faster than anyone expected. By the time people realized what was happening, the whole back section was going up. Rowan was walking past when he smelled smoke. Didn't hesitate. Ran inside while others were still figuring out what to do. Mrs. Callahan was on the second floor, trapped by flames blocking the main staircase. Rowan found the back stairs, made it up through smoke that was already choking, found her huddled in a corner of her bedroom. "Can you walk?" he shouted over the roar of the fire. "I think so." He got her up, got her moving. The back stairs were engulfed now, no way down that way. The window was their only option. "I can't jump from here," Mrs. Callahan said, looking at the two-story drop. "You won't have to." Rowan tore down the curtains, knotted them together with the bed sheets, tied one end to the bed frame. It wasn't much, wasn't safe, but it was something. "Climb down as far as you can," he told her. "Then drop. People will catch you." "What about you? I'll be right behind you. Go." She went. Eliza, watching from below, saw Mrs. Callahan appear at the window, saw the makeshift rope, saw her climb down with shaking hands. When she dropped the last 6 feet, Dutch and Sam caught her. Then Rowan appeared, started his own descent. The rope broke halfway down. He fell hard, hit the ground with a sound that made Eliza's stomach drop. For a terrible moment, he just lay there, not moving. Then he groaned, rolled to his side, started pushing himself up. "Stay down," Dutch ordered, kneeling beside him. "You might have broken something." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You just fell 12 feet. 12 feet is nothing. I'm fine." He wasn't fine. His left arm hung wrong, and he was bleeding from somewhere. But he was alive. Mrs. Callahan was alive. And the fire department, such as it was, had arrived and was getting the fire under control. Doc Perry confirmed what Dutch had suspected. Broken arm, broken rib, concussion. Rowan was ordered to bed rest for 2 weeks minimum. He lasted 3 days before trying to go back to work. "Absolutely not," Eliza said, blocking the door of their room. "I'm fine. You have a concussion and a broken arm. You are definitionally not fine. I can work one-handed." "Rowan, stop." He stopped, looked at her with frustration and something else, fear, maybe. "I can't just sit here, can't be useless." "You're not useless. You saved Mrs. Callahan's life. That's one thing, one moment, doesn't balance out all the what? All the times you helped people, fixed things, showed up when nobody else would?" She moved closer. "You don't have to keep proving yourself. You've already proven enough." "Have I? Because it feels like I'm still waiting for someone to tell me I'm allowed to stay." "Then let me tell you, you're allowed to stay. Not because you earned it through some grand gesture, just because you're here. Because you keep choosing to be here. That's enough." He looked at her for a long moment. Then something in his face relaxed, just slightly. "Okay, okay, okay. I'll rest, but only because you're threatening to tie me to the bed." "I would absolutely do that." "I know. That's why it's working." The 2 weeks of forced rest gave them time they hadn't had since arriving. Time to talk without exhaustion clouding everything. Time to actually figure out what they were building together. "What do you want?" Rowan asked one evening while Eliza was reading and he was pretending not to be bored out of his mind. "Right now, for you to heal properly so I don't have to keep playing warden." "I mean long term. What do you actually want from life?" She set down her book. "I don't know. I thought I wanted stability, but that turned out to be code for stagnation. Then I thought I wanted independence, but that just meant isolation. Now I think maybe I want connection, purpose, belonging." She looked at him. "What about you?" "Same, probably, but also," he struggled with the words. "I want to stop carrying everything I've done wrong, like it's the only thing that defines me. Want to be someone who made mistakes, but isn't just his mistakes." "You already are." "Am I? Because sometimes I look at myself and that's still all I see." "Then stop looking at yourself through your own eyes. Look through mine." "And what do you see?" "I see someone who bought every pie I had just to feel connected to something steady. Someone who helped people without being asked. Someone who ran into a burning building to save someone he barely knew. Someone who's trying every day to be better than he was. She held his gaze. That's what I see. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Thank you. For what? For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. The moment stretched between them, full of things neither knew how to say. Then Eliza did something she'd been thinking about for months, but had been too scared to act on. She leaned over and kissed him. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't passionate or desperate, just a simple press of lips that said what words couldn't, that they'd gone through hell together and come out choosing each other again and again until the choosing became something more than survival. When she pulled back, Rowan looked stunned. Was that okay? She asked. Yeah. Good, because I've been wanting to do that for a while. How long? Probably since you stepped between me and Turner that first day. Maybe before. Hard to pinpoint exactly. I've been wanting to kiss you since you refused to sell me all your pies. That was literally the first day we met. I know. Terrible timing. They both laughed, and it felt like something releasing, like they'd been holding their breath for months and could finally exhale. By the time Rowan was cleared to work again, something fundamental had changed between them. Not just the acknowledgement of feelings, though that was part of it, but a deeper settling, an understanding that they were building something together, not just surviving side by side. Eliza's pie business was thriving now. She'd expanded to breads and pastries, hired an assistant, young Sarah Morrison, who needed work and had good hands. The table had grown to 2 tables. People came from neighboring towns. Rowan worked at the mill, but also took on other jobs around town. Repairs, construction, problem solving. He was good at it, and people had stopped questioning whether they could trust him. He'd proven it through actions, over and over, until the proof became undeniable. 6 months after their return, Sam approached them with a proposition. The old bakery building's been sitting empty for 3 years, he said. Owner moved on, never sold it, but I know him, could arrange for you to buy it. Reasonable price. Eliza felt her heart skip. A real bakery? A real bakery. You're already running one out of tables on the street. Might as well have walls and an oven that doesn't require hauling everything daily. She looked at Rowan. He looked back. We'd need a loan, she said. I can help with that. Your business is solid. You're a good risk. It took 2 months to arrange everything. 2 months of paperwork and negotiations and planning. 2 months of Eliza letting herself imagine a future that looked like staying, like roots, like home. The bakery opened on a cold morning in late autumn. Eliza stood behind the counter in a space that was actually hers, looking at shelves she'd built and an oven she'd chosen, and windows that let in light that felt like possibility. Rowan had helped with everything, the repairs, the painting, the heavy lifting, had insisted on it, even when she said he'd done enough. It's not just your bakery, he'd said. It's ours, our life, our choice to stay. The first customer was old Tom. He looked around approvingly, then ordered his usual peach pie. Looks good, he said. Thanks, Tom. Glad you came back. Town's better with you in it. It was the most he'd said to her in 17 years. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. The day was steady. Not overwhelming, but solid. People came. People bought. People stayed to talk, to catch up, to be part of something that felt like community instead of just coexistence. That evening, after closing, Eliza and Rowan stood in the empty bakery, looking at what they'd built. We did it, she said. We did. I thought we'd be running forever. So did I. What changed? Rowan thought about that. I think we stopped running from things and started running toward them, toward each other, toward the possibility of belonging, toward the idea that maybe we deserved a place to call home. Do we deserve it? I don't know, but we're here anyway, and that's enough. Eliza leaned into him, felt his arm come around her shoulders. Through the window, she could see Ember Flats settling into evening, lights coming on, people heading home, the town doing what towns do. It wasn't perfect. There were still people who didn't trust them, still moments that were hard, still days when she wondered if they'd made the right choice. But they'd stopped running, stopped trying to find a perfect place, and started making this place work. And in the making, in the staying, in the daily choice to keep building, they'd found what they were looking for. Not control, not certainty, not a life without complications, just a place worth staying for, and someone worth staying with. That Eliza had learned, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The bakery became a fixture. Seasons changed. The business grew. Rowan expanded his work, became the person people called when things needed fixing, not just physical things, but problems that required thought and care. They got married the following spring. Nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony with Sam officiating and half the town in attendance. Dutch gave Eliza away, which felt right in a strange full-circle way. Mrs. Callahan baked the cake, insisting it was the least she could do. Their life settled into the kind of comfortable routine that once would have felt like stagnation, but now felt like peace. They'd learned the difference between standing still out of fear and standing still out of choice. Some nights, lying in bed in the room above the bakery that had become their home, Eliza would think about the day Rowan first rode into town. How scared she'd been. How certain that his arrival meant trouble. She'd been right about the trouble, just wrong about what it meant, because the trouble had cracked her open, made her question everything she thought she knew about safety and belonging and what it meant to build a life. And in that cracking, in that questioning, she'd found something she didn't know she was missing. She'd found herself. The version that made choices instead of accepting circumstances. The version that fought for what mattered instead of just surviving. The version that believed she deserved more than just going through motions. And she'd found him. This complicated, damaged, trying man who'd been running so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. Who'd offered her everything he had, which wasn't much, and then worked every day to make it enough. They weren't perfect. They fought sometimes, made mistakes, had days when old fears resurfaced and they had to consciously choose each other all over again. But that was the secret, Eliza had learned. Love wasn't about finding someone who made everything easy. It was about finding someone worth doing the hard work with. Someone who saw your worst and chose you anyway. Someone who you saw at their worst and couldn't imagine choosing anyone else. Rowan had been a stranger with unfinished business, had become a complication she couldn't solve, had transformed into a partner she couldn't imagine living without. And Ember Flats, the town that had felt like a prison, then a betrayal, then a place she'd left behind, had become home. Not because it was perfect, but because they'd made it theirs through staying, through building, through refusing to let fear dictate their lives. Years later, when people asked about their story, they'd tell different versions. Sometimes it was about pies and persistence. Sometimes about running and returning. Sometimes just about two people who found each other when neither was looking. But the truth was simpler and more complicated than any single telling. It was about learning that belonging isn't something you find. It's something you create through showing up, day after day, choosing connection over isolation, courage over comfort, hope over certainty. It was about discovering that home isn't a place that accepts you unconditionally. It's a place you fight for until it becomes yours, a place you make better by being in it, a place that makes you better